Wow, what a collection of stories. This is probably the best I've read alongside Stephen King's Skeleton Crew, and that is saying something. This collection just blew me away. What's up guys, welcome back to Unlimited Reads. My name is Chris and today I'll be doing my spoiler-free review of Robert R. McCammon's short story collection Blue World. Now the collection of stories within were mainly published between 1981 and 1988, and of course Blue World is the title of the novella at the end of the book. Now I read the Kindle edition, which was a little bit cheaper than the paperback editions that I saw online. I was able to download it immediately and start to enjoy it right away, and I do some of the time like to read on the tablet. It's very, very convenient. Now overall I really loved the collection. There were only a couple of stories that didn't quite do it for me. Now that's not to say that the writing was bad or anything. The writing of every story in the collection is fantastic. It's just the type of stories that I'll mention a bit later didn't quite work for me, and I felt that I was getting impatient to move on to the next story. But apart from that, brilliant collection, which I highly recommend. So let's start with talking about the stories, and I'm going to talk about the real standouts in the collection, and there are a lot of these because I enjoyed it so much. The first story I want to talk about is He'll Come Knocking at Your Door. This one was a Halloween piece, and it was something very original that I'd never come across before. It's about how the residents of a town or a neighborhood are actually controlled by an individual, and how he keeps them in check. And when Halloween comes around every year, everyone in the neighborhood is called to account on something. But to go into it any further will be spoiling it, and I'm not going to do that in this video. But it really stood out to me. It stuck with me for a long time after I read the story, and that's what makes a good story in my opinion. Something that resonates with you and you think about it long after you have finished reading it. The next story that I really want to shout out was The Red House. This was fantastic. Robert R. McCammon writes about small town American characters just as well as Stephen King does, and that is a big call, but it's true. It's about a young boy and his father and mother living in a neighborhood, I think it's in the 60s, where all the residents of this suburb or small town work at the same factory, and the housing is provided by the owner of the factory. So the workers live in houses provided by the boss, and all the houses are cookie cutter houses which are all grey, and one day painters turn up and paint a house across the road red. And the father in the story, it's where America has a very strong view on communism, and when the father sees the house painted red, he goes off his nut. And there's a reason why the house is painted red, and I think with the story, the son in the story, he is under his father's thumb, in that the father said, you'll never get anywhere in life, you're best to just stick around what you know and stay in the town and work for the factory and have your family work for the factory. But the son's encounter with this particular individual who moves into the Red House is very pivotal in how he leads the rest of his life. And it was just a really powerful story. There was a lot of emotion, there was a lot of tension, and yeah, it was just a really powerful piece. Absolutely brilliant. The next one I want to talk about is Something Passed By. This was a lot of fun, even though it was a bit frightening on what an alternate world could look like and what it does to the people. And the best thing about this particular story is I really enjoyed the little Easter eggs that McCammon sprinkled throughout the story, which I'm not going to reveal, of course, but it was a very frightening reality that McCammon described, and gave you chills. The next start out was Yellowjacket Summer. We call them wasps here in Australia, and it was the first story in the collection, and it grabs you by the shirt and pulls you straight in. It was about a family who are off the beaten track and they're a little bit lost, and they pull up to a service station that doesn't have any petrol, and there's a strange kid there, and the strange kid, in conjunction with wasps, equals a recipe for creepiness. And it was a very, very confronting story, and the way McCammon writes about wasps or yellow jackets was very, very strong. And yeah, it kicked off the collection really well and really set the tone for what was expected with the rest of the collection. Another really good one was I Scream Man, so not Ice Cream Man, I Scream Man, which was about a character's descent into madness. And it was a fairly short piece, but really packed a punch. I really enjoyed that one. Another really short piece was called Pin, about a guy's contemplation of a pinhead and what he does with that pinhead, which I'm not going to say what he does, but I found that this story was really, really different in the fact that McCammon has written it in a very, very difficult technique to pull off, and that technique is called stream of consciousness, where the rules don't apply with stream of consciousness with full stops and commas and whatnot. So it's a very, very complex form of writing, and for McCammon to pull it off perfectly, it's just fantastic. The way he does stream of consciousness really amps up the tension, and it was a really, really short, pivotal piece. Next we have Nightcrawlers. Now this is about a roadhouse where there's this big storm coming, and a guy pulls up soaking wet. He looks like he's homeless, and as time goes on, whoever is in the cafe at the time get to know his secret, and it's how it puts a new spin on PTSD from Vietnam vets and what effect the war had on him. And to say anything else will spoil it, but it was a very, very original idea, and I found that it was superbly written and one of McCammon's best stories. And now we come to my favourite story in the whole book, and it's undisputed, nothing comes close. It was Blue World, the novella. It was absolutely sensational. We have a priest, Catholic priest, a really devoted Catholic priest, who one day encounters a porn star in his confession box. And normally he's been very good at suppressing his primal urges and whatnot in the form of meditation and study and doing jigsaw puzzles in his apartment in the rectory. And just a whiff of Debbie's perfume actually sets him off, and it starts a war within his soul. He has been such a devoted Catholic priest for quite some time, but then Debbie awakens his primal other self within his soul, and what we see is a very conflicted priest who puts at risk his life in the church, and he becomes infatuated with Debbie and pursues her, and the extra complication is someone else is after Debbie as well, and there's a serial killer element that is the main backbone of the story. But I think this is a perfect example of how you evolve characters over a story. Both characters of John and Debbie are changed by the end of the story, and it just begs the question, can any soul be saved? And yeah, with what happens as time goes on, you get really emotionally invested in both characters, that they come alive. And you know, a novella like this doesn't come along very often, and I kept looking for every opportunity to get back into the novella and just finish it. I think it's about 200 pages and has quite a few chapters in there, and you get an instant rapport with the characters straight away. Now, you know, Debbie is a porn star, but there's more to her than that. There's a lot of layers that get peeled back, and the ultimate ending of the story is also very, very satisfying. Now, the stories that didn't quite do it for me, the first one was Doom City. This is about how it's the end of civilization as we know it, and one man wakes up and finds that his wife is nothing but a skeleton with her hair still attached to her scalp. But it had a very weird ending which confused me a little bit. The next one was Yellachile's Cage. Didn't do a lot for me. It was hard to figure out what was actually going on. And the other two stories that didn't quite do it was Chico, and the other one was Nightcrawlers, the Green Falcon. This was about an aging actor who used to play a superhero and goes on a crusade, if you will, around the city, trying to hunt down a killer. And yeah, it was a little bit long, too long. for me, and there was no real excitement or tension in it that I found, so it was a little bit disappointing. But that said, these were the only stories that didn't quite do it for me. There was nothing wrong with the writing at all. The stories were, you know, well written, but the content just didn't quite do it for me. But there you go. It was a great read. I don't regret picking this up. I just wanted, you know, it's not very often I get in the mood for reading short stories, and if you haven't come across this collection before, I would recommend picking it up straight away. It'll give you the perfect introduction to McCammon's work. I loved Boy's Life and I loved Swan Song, and this just gave me a really good cross-section of what Robert McCammon's work is like, and, you know, this is 3 for 3 for me. So I'm definitely a new Robert McCammon fan, and I definitely plan on reading a lot more of his work in the future. My next novel of his that I really want to read is Mystery Walk, and I know that Mike over at Mike's Book Reviews, his channel is fantastic. You need to check him out. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below, but he is about to read Wolf's Hour, which is another of McCammon's novels, and he has enjoyed Swan Song and Boy's Life as well, and yeah, he is a McCammon fan now, and a lot of people on his channel that visit his channel recommended McCammon to him, and he's just hooked like me. So there you go. That is my review of Blue World. Fantastic, brilliant collection. I certainly don't regret reading it, and I'm sure I'll read it again in the future. It was that good. And yeah, do yourself a favor, if you want to read a few short stories that really pack a punch, go for it, and can't recommend it enough. So there you go, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Offer up any comments below, and let me know if you've read this collection, and if you have, let me know what you thought. I'm always up for a chat, as always, but until next time, guys, see you later.